Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Curt 7-pole trailer wiring on a 2014 Ford Explorer. Now this is going to be a great addition to adding a hitch to your vehicle, whether you have a trailer that has a 7-pole or if it needs a brake controller. This is going to be the first step of that, because you're going to need that 7-pole function. It's going to allow you to get a harness and a brake controller installed. Super easy. Overall, this installation is pretty simple. It's using that factory plug, so really you should be able to knock this out in about 15 minutes or so. So as far as installation goes, I'm going to walk you through all of those steps to make sure that you get yours installed. Now, one of the first things you may or may not have to do is this has a 4-pole already attached into the factory tow package plug. So we're going to be omitting that 4-pole because eventually we're going to be putting a brake controller on here, and the 7-pole is going to be what we need for that to be accomplished. So I am going to remove this factory, or I don't know if it's a factory, but the 4-pole wiring that they have, because we need to utilize that plug. So I'll go ahead and get this removed. Now, going along with this, the factory plug is going to be on this passenger side, and it's a fairly large plug. It's kind of tucked here on the kind of bottom portion of the fascia here on the side of the muffler. We're going to be looking for that. So if you don't have to remove your factory or the 4-pole wiring, that's where you're going to be looking in order to get this all plugged in. So our 4-pole, it does plug in the same as the 7-pole, and it just kind of has a T that jumps in between the factory plugs. So we're going to need to unplug this. If yours doesn't have any wiring, it's very possible that that's already plugged together. But the 7-pole, again, is just going to jump in between the two. So in order to get these plugs out, there is a tab. Sometimes these can get a little bit tricky to separate. But we'll push on that tab, get that unplugged, and do that on the other plug as well. So with that 4-pole out of the way, I'll go ahead and make my connections. It's pretty straightforward. It can really only go in one way here. So that's going to snap in place. Just make sure that it does indeed snap. So give it a quick tug. As you can see, I kind of pressed on it and it wasn't enough. So sometimes you can get kind of built up with dirt and debris and causing it not to snap in together, but that's going to make for a connection that's not great. So truly make sure that this is snapped together. And you'll see on this new plug here, you might have had to take the factory one off. There's a slot here. That's going to go on this white plastic piece, which is really nice. It's going to kind of keep everything tidied up. So once I get this plugged in, I'm going to kind of slide that on that, and then we'll make our other connection to the other factory plug. We do need to run our wires to where we're going to be mounting up our 7-pole. Now this doesn't come with a bracket, and that's something that you're going to want to pick up so it's nice and solid. You can't just loop it onto your safety chain loop like you would a 4-pole. And as far as spots to mount this up, this is kind of a tricky one. If you have a square styled hitch, this one's rounded. The square ones can actually work out pretty well with a bracket like this. There's also extended brackets that allow you to use a large hose clamp to really clamp down on the hitch to create a solid mounting point. We don't have that here. So to get a little creative, there's this factory plastic plug that kind of attaches the rear fascia to a kind of a portion behind it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that out, put some new hardware in, and then run a self-tapper through here. That should be solid enough. The plug is rather long, so make sure that you have that clearance to be able to get those wires attached through. But getting this mounted up first, that way we can run our wires through and get this all attached and mounted up is going to be key. So I'll get our bracket attached, and I'll run the wires through it, and then I'll show you how to connect it to your 7-pole. So now we need to get the center section out of our 7-pole to make our connections. So pretty easy here. First we have this, kind of where this white rubber is. This is going to clamp down around the wires to make sure that it's a nice seal. We're going to back this out a little bit so we can feed the wires through. And it's just got a little a piece that kind of slides up. So if you need to, you can kind of push that down. That's going to open it up. And then you'll have a Phillips head screw on each side. Now you don't need to completely remove it. Just kind of back it out. And normally that'll be enough to get that center section out. If it does come out like that, just hold on to your screw and you'll need that to get that back in place. Now at this point, you should be able to get the plug to kind of pop out. If not, you can just push something from the back end here. So I'll just take my screwdriver, give it a little push, and that's going to give us our plug. So what we'll do is take this portion, the 7-pole outer covering here, and we're going to slide this through and just pull a little bit of extra. It's going to make it a lot easier to get that connection made. Now with this wire loom, it may be a little bit thick, so I'm going to trim back some of the wire loom so we can get our wires pulled through. When making our connections, use the instruction manual as a reference. I'm also going to walk you through it, but you'll see this alignment tab is on the bottom here. And if you go around, some of these will correspond with the lettering, or it says what color goes to each one. It's not 100%. So as I'm kind of looking at my plug here, our brown wire is actually green on here. So some of the stuff is kind of flip-flopped around. So just make sure that you're following this instruction manual, not necessarily what's molded into the plug. And in order to get your wires in place, you're just simply going to back off the screw, and it's going to open up this plate here. So you don't need to take it out all the way. You just kind of want to pull this down, and then if you need to, you can kind of just push this tab down with a flat head, but that's going to open it up, and our wires are already pre-stripped, so we'll put the wires in. If you can kind of curl it around the screw, it's going to give you a pretty good bite, but that's not 100% necessary. Once it's in there, you just tighten it down to where it's snug. You don't need to crank it down too hard. You don't want to damage the wires, but I'll go through, I'll get these all plugged in and then show you where they all go. Now, holding it up just as the instructions have it laid out, I'm going to walk through. Now, some of them do use the same wire colors as denoted on the plug. So the white uses the white, the blue uses the blue, the black uses the black. But as we go around, here where we have our white, next where it says red is going to be our yellow wire. And where we have brown, we have our green wire. And then when it says green, our brown wire is going there. Now the red wire is for reverse lights. That goes into the center pin that's a little bit taller, slightly different. You just back that screw out and then tighten it on, and that's going to get our connection there. So what we'll do with those all tightened down, we'll take that alignment tab, and if you look in, you can see roughly where that is. It's kind of at the 6 o'clock position if you're looking at the plug and it's vertical. So just take this and then slide this back, and it should start to sit flush. You may have to kind of rotate the plug a little bit here. And where these notches are, where the screws go in the side, so that should also align. So just make sure that this is in its proper spot and seated all the way back. Now once that's seated in, we'll go ahead and tighten down those 2 Phillips that are on the side. And then we can also tighten down our grub screw here on our rubber here that attaches around those wires. And that's just going to make sure that it kind of keeps tension on it. It's not going to pull the wires. And with that tightened down, I am going to go ahead and get a little bit of wire loom here just to cover up our wires. Even though it is going to be fairly hidden once we kind of slide this up, I do want to make it look nice and clean. So I'll get that in place, and then you are going to have to source some hardware as far as mounting it up here as well as bolting it up to the bracket. So go to the hardware store and you should be able to pick up just a bolt and a nut should do it fine. Maybe I recommend maybe a nylon lock nut. That way it doesn't rattle loose over time. But with this mounted up, I went ahead and just kind of took the excess wire, which you are going to have quite a bit, and just kind of went back and forth, zip tying it up to the factory wire loom. And the main thing is you want to make sure that this isn't going to rattle loose and make contact with the exhaust. So once we have everything zip tied up nice and clean, we do need to go ahead and check to make sure that the wiring's working. I'm going to be using a 7-pole tester, and this is going to simulate plugging it into a trailer. You probably don't have one of these at home. You can pick one up, or you can just simply hook it up to your trailer, run through the light sequence. If you have a brake controller, you can also test that to make sure you're getting input from that. But you want to make sure it's working before you hit the road. So I'll plug this in. I'm going to hop in the vehicle and run through the light sequence. So starting off, we'll do our running lights. Next, we'll do our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and then finally our brakes. So with everything working properly and it's tested, all that's left to do is hook up to your trailer, get your ball mount on, and hit the road. And that was a look and installation of the Curt 7-pole trailer wiring harness on a 2014 Ford Explorer.